What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Week 8 Power Rankings show. What a wild Week 7 of NFL action it was. A ton of upsets. Feels like in a lot of ways the league got flipped on its head, so it's going to be a very fascinating week of Power Rankings to break down what this all means. Please do hit that like button before we dive in, and let's get started. This week, after all of these bad teams won and showed some signs of life, we actually only have two teams in this bottom tier, the Williams watch tier, and of course our number 32 team doesn't even have their first round pick, but I do think they belong in this bottom tier, and hey, their pick might end up being Caleb Williams anyway. He just might go to a different team. But we'll see what the Panthers can do. Coming off the bye week this week, they're changing play callers. Maybe they can get a little bit more healthy on the defensive side of the ball, which has actually been their bigger problem the last couple of weeks, and their schedule lightens up. So maybe they can show some signs of life here heading into the second half of the season. And then the Arizona Cardinals holding on to that number 31 spot. Another loss, another double-digit loss against the Seahawks. You know, they're kind of holding out to see maybe what Kyler Murray's impending return could do for this team. I'm excited to see it. But at this point in time, you know, this team is just not all that competitive. And as I described on the Fully Inflated Football podcast last week, their shtick has kind of worn off as this scrappy underdog that might upset you. Right now, they haven't really been all that close to winning any of these games, even if they're within a couple scores. But then we climb up to our next tier, and these are just bad teams. But that said, many of these are teams that are climbing out of that Williams watch gutter with wins this week. But that's not going to be the case for our 30th ranked Green Bay Packers. Things just continue to kind of spiral for this team, and they haven't been able to come up with answers for any of their issues this season. Of course, Jordan Love continues to play poor. Really, the last couple of weeks has shown signs of concern for kind of his future in Green Bay. And then offensively, I just continue to be unimpressed week in, week out by Matt LaFleur and his kind of early luster that, you know, was 39-9 or something regular season record in his first few years. Those days seem far gone. They just have not come out prepared. And then, of course, the defense that is fine, but should be so much better. They have one of the best D lines in the NFL, and they're just average on defense. And obviously, Joe Barry, a big part of that. So, yeah, the Packers are just a bad football team. They don't have any impressive wins. They've got losses against low-level teams, and even if they're a missed field goal away from beating the Broncos, I still think they deserve to be towards the bottom of the league right now. Then we have the Chicago Bears. Bears fans will love to be ranked ahead of the Packers for the first time and probably since the Khalil Mack year, the year they went and got him. But, Bears are 2-5. They pick up a blowout win over Brian Hoyer and the Raiders. I think this defense is showing some signs of life here in year 2 of Matt Eberflus's scheme. Reminds me of, I'm not going to go quite this far, but it does remind me a little bit of Robert Saleh, who as a defensive coach, the first couple of years were a little bit slower, and then they started to kind of figure each other out and figure out what works for them. So, give them some credit on that side of the ball. And the run game coming alive this week as well with Tyson Bagent under center. So, yeah, Bears are figuring some stuff out, but I still think they're a bad football team. And then we have the New York Giants, who won this week. They beat the Washington Commanders. Look, I bet against the Giants this week thinking Daniel Jones might start, and I probably wouldn't have made that bet if Tyrod Taylor was starting, and that kind of proved out. I mean, this offense just works much better with Tyrod Taylor. I think I saw a tweet, I can't remember who it was, but pointing out that Tyrod Taylor in 80 pass attempts has just about as many big-time throws as Daniel Jones does over his last 2 seasons. And you just feel it. Tyrod actually wants to push the ball downfield. They're getting Jalen Hyatt involved. They're getting Darren Waller involved. Saquon Barkley is back. We're not seeing fireworks with the Giants offense, but they're at least moving the ball and adequate there right now. And this defense has played so well these last 2 weeks, going back to that tough loss against the Buffalo Bills. So the Giants are starting to, work some things out, looking a little bit more like that scrappy team that was such a pleasant surprise last season. Then the Denver Broncos at number 27. For what it's worth, they have cleaned up their defense. They are tackling so much better. I think getting Justin Simmons back into the lineup helps. They've moved on from their slot corner, have made some changes up front. They have cleaned up the defense. They're not a good defense, but they're not a historically bad defense anymore. And then Russell Wilson and this offense, look, I don't have a whole lot of good things to say about them, but they found some explosive plays this week. Russ did some stuff with his feet, and it was enough to find a win. You know, Denver is kind of treading water at the moment, but hey, win's a win. Then the New England Patriots at number 26. You know, they had a huge fall from grace last week, finding themselves in the Williams watch tier. But a credit to them for really cleaning up a lot of stuff. A credit to Bill O'Brien for finding a game plan and kind of figuring out who should be getting the targets in this offense, what sorts of plays should be working here. And a credit to Mac Jones for playing his best game in a long time in this game, in a big win against the Buffalo Bills. And you know, it was Demario Douglas, it was Pharaoh Brown, it's, you know, peppering Kendrick Bourne with targets and getting their offensive linemen back healthy as well. Cole Strange, Mike Onwenu back in the lineup this week. You felt that in this game against the Bills. Trent Brown, the left tackle, too. So that's a big deal to kind of get their offensive line back because they've been rolling out a bunch of backups. We'll see if this can kind of continue to build. Bill Belichick teams are known for self-correcting and being much better in the second half of the year, but we also can't just ignore just how bad they were in the first 6 weeks of the season either. But a huge week for the Patriots, getting a +4 and a tier jump up. Now, before we get to our next tier, I got to tell you guys about the sponsor for today's video, Underdog Fantasy. You've all seen the screenshots of everybody sharing their pick'em contests. This is the best way to increase your interest in any given football game. You're selecting fantasy slips, selecting player stats, higher or lower, anything from fantasy points to passing yards to interceptions to sacks to tackles, assists, you name it. And you can get up to 20 times your entry if you hit on all 5 of your selections. You can buy insurance, so that's you just got to get 4 out of 5. I love Underdog. I've been loading up Underdog slips all season long. It's just a cheap way to win some money and increase your interest in some of these bad matchups like Bears-Chargers on Sunday Night Football. Go get yourself some Tyson Bagent, you know, scramble yards or something. I don't know. But right now, if you sign up using promo code TFG at Underdog, they will match up to $100 on your first deposit. That's easily a season's worth of free pick'em slips, and you'll support my channel in the process. So that's promo code TFG over at Underdog Fantasy. But now we have our NFL middle class. This tier not changing a ton this week, but some reshuffling of the order. I am going to start things off with the Raiders, who, with the combination of Brian Hoyer and Aiden O'Connell, would be more of a Williams watch type of tier team in terms of how bad they are, because that was just putrid against the Bears. But Jimmy Garoppolo's injury does not look serious. They expect to have him back soon. And as we've seen, this offense just functions much better. They take care of the football, and I think that complements their defense when Jimmy is in there. So expecting Jimmy Garoppolo back and some better days ahead, but that was very ugly in Chicago this week. Then we have the Tennessee Titans, who are going to move down 4 on the bye week this week, and obviously losing Kevin Byard in a trade for nothing, obviously, is going to ding their talent base on that defense. But I think it's a bigger picture deal here that kind of tells you what they're thinking about how the rest of this season is going to go. They're coming off a loss against the Colts and trading away a captain of their defense, a staple player for them, and one of the best players on their team. With Ryan Tannehill still dealing with an injury, I think this team is trending in the wrong direction. We'll kind of see what this team looks like. I still think they're a competitive bunch because it is a Mike Vrabel coached football team, but they're definitely in danger. If they pick up some ugly losses here, really tanking down towards the bottom, and maybe that's what they want. I don't know. But then we have the New Orleans Saints, a tough loss against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, to be fair, they were a dropped Foster Moreau touchdown away from forcing overtime in that game. So I think maintaining their ranking in a loss kind of makes sense. But then we have the Washington Commanders dropping down a spot this week. They go and lose to the Giants. Obviously a disappointing game. This is a team that they felt like maybe they should be kind of in the mix for one of those wild card spots, and that loss is going to prove substantial in that race. I mean, not just from a standings perspective, but I mean, you can't beat Tyrod Taylor and the New York Giants. It's a tough pill to swallow, especially, you know, when you just can't get things working offensively. Everything just kind of out of sync this week, from Howell to the O-line to the receivers to the run game. Just a rough week and a tough pill to swallow this week for the Commanders. Then the Tampa Bay Bucks, who lose their third straight, you know, just when I had given them credit, they turn around and the offense starting to look much more like the offense we maybe thought we might see with Baker Mayfield in this group. Only 13 points against the Falcons. And, you know, defensively, they're going to do their thing, but there's just not a ceiling on this team really at all. They have a nice floor where they can maybe win games 20-16 against average opponents, but that's about it for the Bucks. Then the Indianapolis Colts. I'll be honest, I overreacted last week. Gardner Minshew went out and played probably the worst game of his career the week before against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I should have had the foresight to say, hey, he can bounce back. He's better than that. And he did. He had a good game, did some fun stuff with his legs, put up 38 points against the Cleveland Browns. And even though they end up losing this game that really could have gone either way down the stretch, I think they deserve to get, I dropped them 10 last week. So I think they deserve to get some of that respect back. This team is still fighting and feels very well coached under Shane Steichen. They've got some underrated playmakers at this point with Josh Downs. Alec Pierce has come along. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor back into the mix. So, yeah, Colts are frisky. Then the Atlanta Falcons, who couldn't seem to stop themselves from fumbling into the end zone this week, but they were moving the ball at will, really, against a Bucs defense. It just came down to the red zone deficiencies, some on Desmond Ridder, some not. But they continue to find creative ways to get the offense moving, and the defense is just very sound, very solid. They just have a bunch of good plus players throughout that unit. So, and I think they've been pretty well coached with Nielsen coming in. Then we have the Houston Texans, who are going to lose a spot on the bye week here. No fault of their own. That is because a team is jumping them who had a huge week as we climb up into our next tier, and that is the Minnesota Vikings, picking up their second straight win, this time against the San Francisco 49ers on prime time football. And honestly, this Vikings team has settled in and I think is at this point probably a better real football team than they were last year, because they actually have a defense. And Brian Flores has taken a roster that, as we talked about coming into the year, we were like, look, they lost a lot of pieces, but the coaching, the difference in coaching could and should make this a much more average unit. And that's like exactly what they are. They're like the 15th defense in the league, which you give that to this offense, even without Justin Jefferson, that's a pretty good football team, honestly, especially when the offensive line is coming together and playing like they did last night. I mean, they kicked the 49ers' ass up front. Christian Darrisaw, really officially one of the best offensive tackles in the NFL. You got good guys up and down that group. The Dalton Reisner signing, a good one. And then Kirk Cousins deserves his flowers as well. That was one of the best, most memorable Kirk Cousins performances, and his comfort within this offense. He just, time and time again, knew exactly where to go with the football. There was multiple times in that Niners game when the pass rush did get home, and Kirk would just calmly step up or know exactly where to go, and they weren't just checkdowns either. He's firing the ball, over the shoulder of linebackers on benders. Like, he was really stellar on Monday Night Football, and if nothing else, deserves to have the sort of, primetime Kirk sucks narrative wiped away from him. That's not who he is anymore. He's playing really good football. Then we have the LA Rams, who lose this week to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The offense tapers off a little bit against, obviously, a really good Steelers defense. I do think the offense will have better days ahead. It was going to be a tough matchup against the Steelers, knowing that the O-line is not the Rams' strength, and it is the Steelers' strength on defense, is that D-line. I'm not necessarily worried about the Rams, but we knew that they're not like some superstar team and we're capable of a loss like that. But, they're going to drop down 2 spots here. Then we have the LA Chargers dropping down 2 this week, losing to the Chiefs. Man, I'm just so sick of Brandon Staley. Like, I get that Patrick Mahomes is a difficult quarterback to game plan against, but your game plan is really going to be just playing soft Fangio zones as if this is 2020 before Patrick Mahomes figured out how to just take everything underneath and work with Travis Kelce to shred you. There's no, manufacturing a pass rush like we saw at times last year, blitzing guys like Drew Tranquill. The players aren't making plays there either. This defense is just bad right now. And you're in year 3 now with Brandon Staley. Like, what are we doing, man? If they lose to the Bears somehow on Sunday Night Football and they don't fire Brandon Staley, I mean, we got to start wondering what the hell is going on with ownership at that point, because it's just so brutal. The offense isn't free of blame either. Herbert just continues to leave a little bit to be desired in terms of being this, 55, max contract, supposedly elite quarterback. He just hasn't felt like that guy this year. He's felt much more like a Cousins or a Goff. And it's not just Herbert, too. Like, I mean, I like Kellen Moore. I think he's a really good OC, but like they went run, punt late in this game. They're not using Quentin Johnston the way everybody said they should when they drafted him. The guy getting design touches is Quentin Johnston's college teammate, Darius Davis, had like 3 gimmick plays. Can we give one of those to Quentin Johnston? Like, he's open in this game. He made a nice back shoulder catch. I don't get what they have against their number 1 pick. This team is just frustrating across the board, but they're still going to rank 15th. Like, they're still going to be probably 6.5-point favorites against the Bears. And that's really what makes this team so frustrating, is they should be winning more games than they are right now. Not that we expected them to beat the Chiefs, but just be more competitive in that matchup too. Anyway, let's move on to a team that is like the complete opposite, a team that has no business being 4-2, but can finish games late. And for all the Matt Canada criticisms, this is a very well-coached team. They play physical. They play defense like they want to play defense. And they understand the, value of playing team football. And that's really what they did. Kenny Pickett actually played really well this week, made a couple of big throws, did a good job distributing to both George Pickens, who continues to be awesome, plus Deontay Johnson back into the lineup, I think is so important for this offense and for Matt Canada as a play caller, because Johnson is that quick separator in what Matt Canada views is supposed to be a quick-hitting passing game. It is important to have Deontay Johnson out there for that. So I think the offense is trending in the right direction, and we know what this defense is. So feeling better about the Steelers now. They're going to get a big jump this week, +5, and jumping up a tier as well, taking them much more seriously. Then we've got the New York Jets, who were on bye this week. Very fascinated to see kind of what Zach Wilson's going to look like moving forward, coming off the bye. And it should be a fun 5 or 6 weeks of time to evaluate the Jets and see where they're at. But then we have the Seattle Seahawks, who pick up a win against the Cardinals. Don't have a lot to say. They should beat the Cardinals. They were double 2-score favorites. They win by 10. The defense, Boye Mafe, coming along. Love to see that. He's a player that I've questioned if he was going to take that next step this year, and definitely appears he's going to, so that's big for the Seahawks and their defense that continues to play really well these last few weeks. A big game against the Bengals the week before, so that's a development. If their defense can consistently play like that, they're in business. And maybe they will be due for a jump up, but a big test this week for the offense against the Browns. Geno continues to kind of put the ball in harm's way and play some sort of erratic football. So against this Browns defense, it's going to be a real test for the Seahawks to see if they kind of belong in that next tier or not. But let's jump up to the next tier, where it's actually the same 7 teams as we had last week in this sort of playoff teams that I think have Super Bowl potential about them, but not quite tier 1. And that's going to start with the Cincinnati Bengals, who were on bye this week, really just kind of holding on to that number 11 spot. And, I think the bye week could potentially be really big for the Bengals with Joe Burrow another week to just fully rest the calf. T. Higgins, let the ribs heal up. I can't imagine, playing wide receiver with a broken rib just sounds so painful. So I think that could be a big development for the Bengals. Excited to see what their next month or so looks like. And then the Cleveland Browns, they're going to lose a spot. No big deal. The Jags are going to take the 9 spot after winning their 3rd straight. Which I think is fair. But for Cleveland, it's what a weird game. Like, I think the over-under in this game was in the 30s, so both teams individually would have cleared the over. You don't see that very often. So just not an expected outcome here. A wild game with a ton of big plays. And what's even more weird about it is the quarterbacks didn't play all that great, especially the Browns. Like, PJ Walker is clearly a backup. But this defense that has been all the talk of the town with Cleveland was both the reason they won this game and could have been the reason they lost. Like, they made huge game-changing plays, scoring points, blocking a field goal, literally strip sack touchdown. Myles Garrett with a defensive player of the year performance in this one. Yet at the same time, they're, giving up huge plays. Not a good week in terms of headiness and physicality from the secondary. You have, Michael Pittman bursting through the secondary on a dig route for a 60-yard touchdown. They lose Josh Downs on a broken play by a false offsides jump by Myles Garrett. So they gave up some big plays, but I still think this defense is going to turn it back around and show us again just how great they are. And I feel confident saying that because those big plays were still there from the defense. But the Deshaun Watson thing is also a big reason why they're falling here. A part of the reason I still had them inside the, single digits, basically, was this belief that the offense was going to get better with Deshaun Watson coming back. And he's not coming back. It's weird. It's getting weirder and weirder every week. He's medically cleared last week, but didn't play. This week he's medically cleared. He plays, and then it's a concussion protocol that, they take him out after some really bad passes. It's getting really weird in Cleveland, and that is a factor. As great as their defense is, you have to have more reliable ways to score on offense than just Jerome Ford bursting through the defense because Darius Leonard can't run anymore. That's not the only reason that play happened, but I did notice it. But yeah, Browns are a very fascinating football team. Then we have the Jacksonville Jaguars who pick up another big win. The offense they continue to put up points, man. Trevor Lawrence continues to just put it on teams, even if he's not perfect necessarily drive in, drive out. Loved some of the scrambles he had this week. Their offense is roaring. Defensively, they're fine. Jags are they're in a good spot right now. They kind of feel like they know who they are, and winning games 31-24 is in their wheelhouse really any given week. Then we have the Detroit Lions at number 8. Obviously, a really just confusing week for Detroit, a team that has for the better part of 2 seasons now been the team that comes out prepared with a good game plan and comes out the gate physical and strong and, ready to take it to the opponent. That wasn't there this week. The Baltimore Ravens just kicked the shit out of them for 60 minutes, really. I know they had, some garbage time drives at the end there when the Ravens led up, but this game was 35-0. The Ravens had 330 yards to 30 yards at some point. It was just an absolute blowout. They looked like the 2008 Detroit Lions in this game. I'm not going to just forget about all the good stuff they've done, and I feel very confident that this is going to be their worst performance of the season. So they're only going to drop down 1, but it's obviously concerning that when they run into a good team in Baltimore, that's what they look like. And, we know they can put it on bad teams. They've been doing that mostly this year, but, they lost to the Seahawks at home. The defense now really in their 2 meaningful games, kind of discounting that Chiefs game where there was no Travis Kelce and the defense got stops because the receivers were dropping the ball, but they were open and Mahomes was hitting them. When they've gone against good offenses that play like they should, this defense has looked concerning. So, we'll see how they respond. I'm pretty confident that they will. but a bit of a reality check for Detroit, to say the least. Then we have the Buffalo Bills at number 7. Really getting concerned about the Bills because, I think we know who they are. They are this offensive team with Josh Allen who can make spectacular plays, and maybe once, maybe twice, maybe 4 times a game he's going to put the ball in harm's way. It's just this high variance, like how many turnovers do you get any given week, and when do they come, and how important are they on the outcome of the game? But they're going to move the ball and keep firing. Defensively, though, they just have so many injuries right now at every level. Ed Oliver and Jones are out up front, and Von Miller still out. You got Matt Milano obviously out now. They're injured in the secondary. It's just you can only suffer so many injuries, even if McDermott's done a pretty good job coaching this year. It's just, it's not a super sustainable winning formula. They're really just asking Josh Allen to play Superman football every week, and there's going to be weeks where he does it, but there's going to be weeks like this where he comes out and has a lousy interception out the gate that kind of puts them behind the 8 ball right away, and then when the defense is having a hard time getting off the field, it just, again, it's a difficult winning formula. So they can beat anybody any given week, but it's tough, man. It's really tough. Then the Dallas Cowboys, who were on bye this week, my thoughts on them really haven't changed all that much here. And then how about the Baltimore Ravens, man? They're getting a +3 this week. They climb up into the top 5, and I debated putting them up into the top tier. I'm not quite there yet on Baltimore, but just blown away by Mike McDonald's defense here. Now, a credit to some of these guys, too, like Madubuike and Clowney, who have been good individual players, but they're also being complemented by some of the best blitz scheming and just overall defensive play calling in general. I think McDonald has kind of brought his own creative thoughts to the NFL in terms of defense. They seem to run a bit of a unique scheme. It's a little bit of the old kind of like attacking, blitz-heavy Ravens defense, but also a little bit of this kind of more tempered pattern-matching zone defense that he brings over from the college game, just getting hired from Michigan last year. So I really like a lot of the stuff they do schematically, and obviously you got players at all 3 levels of that defense. But hey, that's not even where the excitement starts with the Ravens, because Lamar Jackson is, to me, second in terms of like MVP consideration right now. This was just a complete performance from the get-go. Man, he really has been impressive in this more, modern passing game approach, which this was what we all wanted to see, right? And this is why. This is why you open the door for this to happen. He has unlocked a whole bunch of stuff as a quarterback that just didn't happen in Greg Roman's offense. His pocket presence to me has been so impressive. Not that it wasn't in years past, but I think the repetition and consistency of getting all these real dropbacks has just made him feel so much more comfortable, just kind of sensing pressure, escaping the rush, using his mobility. He's scrambling to throw, not scrambling to run. The downfield accuracy has been very good this year, better than it's ever been for Lamar. He's seeing the field well. He's reading things out. He's really been an elite quarterback this year, which it's been a while since we've seen Lamar play at an elite level. So it's so fun to watch this Ravens team. I'm almost talking myself into putting them in the Super Bowl favorites tier, but they have had some frustrating weeks where they kind of shoot themselves in the foot a little bit too much. So I want to see them keep things rolling, but they're very close to entering our next tier here, which is our Super Bowl favorites tier. We're going to have the Dolphins at 4, the Niners at 3. Obviously, 2 teams coming off frustrating losses, both, tough primetime road games against good opponents. But I could see some power rankings putting the Ravens up ahead of these 2, depending on how much recency you want to put into it. I still trust in both the Niners and Dolphins case with the talent that they have on both sides of the ball and the coaching that they have on both sides of the ball to get this thing right. Teams lose in the NFL. It happens. But in the case of the Dolphins, too, I actually think they played a pretty solid game against the Eagles. It's just, on one hand, you have Jalen Hurts, who was unconscious in that game. It's similar to what we said. That's twice now, actually. They ran into the Bills when Josh Allen played one of the best games we'll see from a quarterback this year and any year. So that's I don't know if that's an indictment of their defense that these quarterbacks are having these incredible performances against them. I guess that's difficult to measure. But to me, it's just, great quarterbacks playing their best football against the Dolphins and showing up well prepared against a big opponent. So it's a challenge they're going to run into, but I think it is interesting to note that. But I also thought the Dolphins got a bad beat in terms of the refs. And I hate to bring up the refs. Dolphins fans think I hate them anyway, so I don't mind doing it. But I did think the Dolphins were unfairly hurt by bad calls in this game. And I don't say that very often in this show, but it was noticeable. But at the same time, you can't have Tua just laying a duck up there on a bad read, late in the game when you're driving about to tie the game in the fourth quarter. And that is something that Tua is capable of doing, even though he had an otherwise really great night. So, I still trust this Dolphins team to be really great, but they are going to drop down 2 and seem to be maybe a slight tick behind a team like the Eagles. And then the Niners, I'm curious, what people's panic meter is at with the Niners. For me, I do still try to take the whole picture into account, and they spent the first 5 weeks of this season feeling like they were almost a tier ahead of everybody else. And I do think not having Debo is a big deal because, Purdy, I think, has shown us he's a little more human, for sure, not an MVP candidate and all that, but he still made some plays in that game against the Vikes. But the thing with Purdy is because of his lack of arm talent, he does struggle to command the ball when he's trying to push it downfield, anything from 15 plus yards. And that's going to lead to some accuracy issues and putting the ball in harm's way and accidentally throwing the ball right to Cam Bynum. And that's why I think having Debo in there and having Trent Williams in there to help the run game too, it's so important to have those early down easy buttons. And without Trent, without Debo, without McCaffrey the second half last week, you're seeing they can't put this offense on Brock Purdy's shoulders. But I feel like we knew that. They just got to get these guys back healthy. But at the same time, this has been a thing for the Niners, is losing star players throughout the year. And if that's the case, maybe they did peak too early. Having their guys healthy to start the year. It's going to be an interesting thing to monitor here over the course of the next couple of weeks. But I do think we have a clear-cut top two, the 2 6-1 teams in the league. Well deserve it. I've got the Eagles 2, the Chiefs 1. We're right back here with our Super Bowl teams from last year. No Super Bowl hangover for these guys. And I think the Eagles now 2 out of 3 weeks, going back to the Rams game in week 5 or 6, whatever that was, they looked like that team again. And then I think they looked like that team again this week against the Dolphins. And even going back to the Jets game, if Jalen Hurts just doesn't have the worst performance of his relevant quarterback career in the NFL, they still probably look like that team. So, offensively, A.J. Brown, just so unbelievably good. He, to me, has entered that Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson level of wide receiver. Jalen Hurts deserves all the credit in the world for a huge bounce back week. Probably took his performance against the Jets personally and then bounced back with his best game of the year. So that's just who Jalen Hurts is. Was just a immediate smack in my face for being critical of him. Just every single time he does something worth criticizing, he corrects it and comes completely back the other direction. He's just remarkable in terms of his work ethic and attention to detail in that way. And then defensively, they've done some really good stuff with their D-line, and obviously getting Kevin Byard doesn't hurt either. So yeah, Eagles are amazing. And then we have the Chiefs at number 1. And I'm going to talk about the Chiefs a little bit here. And, I get it. There's nothing that hasn't been said about Patrick Mahomes, before. And it's tough to keep saying the same things. But my God, he was unbelievable in this Chargers game. He is, to me, playing quarterback at the highest level we've ever seen. And I've said that before, and he just continues to show it. There's no schematic thing you can do to try to neutralize what Mahomes does. He's got the mind at this point to pick you apart. You can't, if you're Brandon Staley, you can't just do the Fangio thing like maybe you could if you're the Broncos in 2020, where you're rotating safeties and trying to play top down and force Mahomes to take the underneath stuff and trying to confuse him with rotating coverages. If you do that, Mahomes is going to pick you apart with, Kelsey, obviously, but Sky Moore and Tony and the dump offs to Isaiah Pacheco and their screen game. Like, they will destroy you if you try to do that at this point. They've completely zigged against the league trends that were trying to stop the original editions of this offense. But it's not just that. Like, if you try to go man coverage, he's going to beat you with his legs, or he's going to make something crazy improvisational, back shoulder throw to Travis Kelsey. You try to rush with 4 and play good coverage on the back end. That's probably the best way to beat any quarterback. But again, you're just counting on players to make plays. There's nothing you can really do schematically to attack this offense right now. And even if they don't have, Tyreek Hill, they're starting to, find some chunk plays to Marquez Valdez-Scantling in this game. So they're so difficult to get off the field offensively. And then, that's before I even mentioned this defense that I think is really the star of this team, like on a full scale. What people don't realize is because they've been able to just say, okay, it's Mahomes and Kelsey and some ancillary options on offense, they have dumped resources into this defense, and they've drafted well. George Karlaftis is having a great year too. They get Charles Omenihu in free agency, Chris Jones. This is a good defensive line. These linebackers are some of the most underrated guys in the league. Now, Bolton's going to miss about 6 weeks, but they have depth. They signed Drew Tranquill. They have Leo Chanel, who's a great third-round pick. They have Willie Gay. They have options there. And then in the secondary, they got dudes all over the place, man. McDuffie and Snead are like the most underrated cornerback duo in the league. You got Justin Reed. Like, they got dudes everywhere and a great coach in Steve Spagnuolo. So that's my weekly selling point on the Kansas City Chiefs, who I still see people saying, aren't as good as their record shows. And I'm like, they're maybe not as flashy as you would hope for. They're not as flashy as any of these 3 teams in the top tier. But I think their formula for consistently winning football games is the best out of this group. So there's your power rankings this week. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please do hit that like button if you did. Let me know where I'm right, where I'm wrong. Please subscribe. We got a big week ahead. Studs and Duds coming back this weekend. I'm going to try to get a film breakdown up as well. We've got the Hot Routes live show with Matthew Collar here tonight at 6 Eastern. So lots of great stuff here. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon. Peace out.